The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Jacob Kaza. I'm a senior planner with the City of Westminster's Planning Division. I'd like to welcome you all to the project meeting or neighborhood meeting for the Orchard Estates development. On camera with me right now is Sean Krieger. He's the lead engineer for the development team on the project, and he'll go ahead and start off with his presentation, and then staff will have a short presentation, and we'll be able to have questions at the end. So if I could turn it over to Sean, you could take it away.
Thanks, Jacob. Good evening. As you know, my name is Sean Krieger, and I'm with DCI Engineering, and I'll be presenting the following preliminary and official development plan for the Orchard Estate project. Next slide. Our meeting agenda, we basically are going to have the overview and then questions and comment format, which Jacob will be taking care of. We'll have an applicant presentation, the city planner presentation, and then a questions and comments, as Jacob mentioned. And then we'll give out our contact information at the end. Next slide.
Jacob, we're not hearing your audio.
No.
Oh, thank you, John. I muted myself. So for everybody who's watching us on GoToWebinar, this is an interactive meeting, so you are able to interact with us through the questions box. So we can watch all your questions if you type any in now, and we will read them aloud and go ahead and answer them. All of that you should see off to the right on your screen, depending on the device you're using. And then if we have extra time at the end and somebody would like to speak a question rather than type it out, we will do that as well. But please save any other questions that you have until the end, and then we'll go ahead and go through all of them as time permits. Thanks, Sean.
Yeah. Next slide. Okay, so our project team consists of the owner developer, which is 3700 LCC LLC. The civil engineer is DCI Engineering. The landscape architect is Chris Peterson. Illumination engineer is Nielsen Engineering. And the environmental and soils engineer is Hollingsworth Associates. And our surveyor is Gillian's Land Consultants. Next slide. So our project overview, I'll be going over the project location, existing site description, proposed project scope, which will include a project description, trail connections, park space, site grading and detention, construction phasing, and custom home designs. Next slide. The project is located at 3700 West 104th, and it's a parcel of land that lies on 104th between Sheridan Boulevard and Lowell Boulevard. It's approximately a half mile east of Sheridan Boulevard. Next slide. The site is currently occupied by one north-facing two-story 3,965 square foot house with an attached garage near the middle of the east property line. An in-ground swimming pool with a pool house and a garage outbuilding are south of the existing house. Along the north property line is 104th. 103rd Avenue is along the southern property line, and single-family homes are to the east and west. Next slide. The site is covered with native grass and forbs. It also has large evergreen and deciduous trees around the house and along the perimeter of the property. There's an existing asphalt drive and drive cut in 104th Avenue to the existing house. There is a 6-foot tall privacy fence along 103rd directly behind the existing sidewalk. The property is 7.69 acres and is currently zoned as O1 open agricultural. Next slide. Our proposed project scope. Our primary focus for this project was to create a subdivision within the original winding subdivision that looks as though it's always been there. The streetscape will be designed very similar to the neighboring subdivisions in width and with attached sidewalks. Each new homeowner will be required to plant 3 trees and 20 shrubs in the front of each yard. Once the subdivision is built, it will be difficult to distinguish between the new and the old neighborhoods. Next slide. The proposed parcel will be subdivided into 19 residential single-family detached lots, ranging in size from 10,073 square feet to 17,856 square feet, the average lot size being 12,513 square feet. The existing home will remain in lot 15, along with many of its surrounding trees. The size of the proposed lots for this subdivision will be larger than the neighboring subdivisions. The rezoned comprehensive plan designation dwelling units per acre is 3.5, which equals the adjacent subdivisions. Even though it will be rezoned at 3.5, we are only proposing 2.5 dwelling units per acre. This is far less than what we could have designed it at. With a smaller dwelling unit per acre, we feel as though this will generate less traffic and cut down on the overall impact from this development. The lots are laid out and centered around a 16,803 square foot tract of land designated as a private park. The park area has been increased above the minimum city requirements to help create a usable community space among the residents. It will consist of attractive landscaping, a play area, and a bocce ball court. A trail connection will also be constructed through the park and between the detention pond and lot 9 to provide the residents access to 104th. Benches will also be provided along the pedestrian pathways throughout the project. Decorative pedestrian lighting will be installed along the sidewalks on both sides of the street and along the trails and multi-use paths. A tract of land in the northwest corner of the property is designated for on-site detention. The site grading is designed to follow the existing ground and drainage patterns to minimize the effects to the numerous existing trees throughout the site. Our goal is to save as many healthy trees as possible. Natural grass-lined swales will be graded at the rear of the west lots to direct developed flows to the detention pond. The site grading, construction of the streets, and all utilities will be done prior to any lot development. Once all the streets and utilities are constructed, the lots will be sold individually. Next slide. The housing type for this community will be a mix of designs single and two-story custom homes. Each home will be required to have usable front porches and side or rear patios. Next slide. The custom homes will be designed to meet the city requirements for the zoning and will be built within the dedicated setbacks. Other than the requirements set within this ODP, each home will be unique with minimal design restrictions, creating a true custom home subdivision. Chuck, do you have anything else you want to add about the custom homes?
Cameraman. Yes, I'm trying to get the webcam up here real quick. Yes, good evening. I'm Chuck Haig. I'm with the applicant team. I just wanted to add a few things. I know there were some questions already submitted regarding, size of the home and some of the features the homes may have. Sean's covered a lot of them very well. As far as the size, we're expecting somewhere in the low end 2,400 square foot ranch, maybe up to 3,000 range, probably an average of 2,700 square feet on the ranch homes. The two stories will probably have a minimum size of 3,000 feet. There could be some up to 4,700 on the larger lots, but an overall average of probably 3,800 to 4,200. There was questions also already submitted regarding the price point. We believe, based on other projects that we've explored and looked into, that a custom home of this size and in a setting like this would probably range from a base of about 1.2 million and probably top out somewhere around the 2 million to 4 range, depending on those two-story sizes. As far as the homes themselves, there's some design standards the city has that really creates a nice home. Broken roof lines, the setback Sean spoke about. There's also some design enhancements that we've implemented, based on the city's criteria. There's 50% more or 50% masonry surface on these homes. I know that was a question of a lady earlier today. So other things, they're all listed. Oh yeah. Some other things will all be listed on the ODP itself, which hopefully you can have access to, or if not, we can get those to you. But there are quite a few unique features these homes will have. There'll be solar on a good portion of these, probably minimum 3-car garages on most of them, side entrance garages, so they're not all front loaded. But truly, custom homes where everybody has to come in and they'll be able to design their own home within the parameters set forth in the ODP and by the city. So yeah, again, it should just create a very, very beautiful neighborhood, which will enhance the surrounding area. That's really all I have about that.
Yeah. Jacob, I think that about ends our presentation there.
Okay. Thanks, Sean, and thanks, Chuck. Again, my name is Jacob Kaza. I'm the senior planner who's reviewing their development applications. I'll go briefly over the development applications that they have open with the city, and then through the review process, what the city uses to review them against. And then I believe after that, we have our question and comment portion of the meeting. And then at the very end of the meeting, we'll have some more contact information and some helpful links up as well. Going ahead, so they have 3 different development applications open with the city. The first one, which you don't see here because it's essentially the same thing as this one, is a rezoning application. So the city requires any site over 2 acres in size must be rezoned to PUD or planned unit development. That's the same zoning designation as the windings and almost every single subdivision around you, or any subdivision that's been built since the 1970s in the city. So they will be rezoning from O1 to PUD. That PUD will need to conform with the comprehensive plan for this property. That comprehensive designation is residential R3.5, and Sean already mentioned that their proposal is to be below that 3.5 dwelling unit per acre density, and so they'll be at 2.5 is approximately where they're at. So the other applications are a preliminary development plan and an official development plan. Those are two documents that the city requires. The preliminary development plan, or PDP, generally sets out some development standards as far as setbacks and access points, but it's a more vague document and serves as the first entitlement document. The second entitlement document, the official development plan, or ODP, it becomes very much more specific. It'll show the lots themselves, all the requirements for these custom homes, the landscaping of all the common area, and grading and drainage and those items specifically. Both of those, or all three of the applications, have already gone through a first staff review. And after the first staff review, the city requires the developer to host a neighborhood meeting, and that's what we're here for tonight. And then after this neighborhood meeting, they'll take any feedback from this neighborhood meeting and then all of the staff comments from the first review and go revise their plans and then resubmit them back to the city, where they'll come in for additional staff reviews, where we will ensure compliance with the design standards and other city codes. After those, both the rezoning and the preliminary development plan require review and consideration by the Planning Commission and City Council. So they will go through public hearings. The official development plan, depending on what it entails, can either be approved administratively or it could require a public hearing by the Planning Commission and consideration by them. If the approvals are granted by either City Council or the Planning Commission, then the developer will then prepare their civil construction drawings for the roadways and the new water and sewer lines, and then they'll go ahead and start that initial construction, and they'll begin selling their lots. And every single homeowner will have to come in with their own individual building permit for their own custom homes. And so likely this will probably take quite a few years to get through for all of the individual homes to get built. So that's where we are in the process. So the standards of approval for preliminary development plans, there are quite a few of them. And so we've got a few highlighted up on the screen here. So conformance with the city's comprehensive plan, sound planning principles, any exceptions from code requirements. So for instance, if they didn't want to meet a setback, they would have to list it on the document and specify that specifically. Compatibility with existing surrounding development. So one thing we're looking for is generally is it similar to what the windings and the Highland neighborhoods are like. Is it have similar heights and bulk and setbacks and uses. And then another one is no adverse impacts on existing or future land uses or development. So one thing about the swale that you heard Sean talk about is that is one way of ensuring that the drainage won't be increased onto neighboring properties. So that's one way of achieving that. And then safe and efficient design of transportation infrastructure. So we'll look at the roadway design and the access point. As well as any standards for the ODP need to be included on the PDP. The ODP itself will be looking at specifically things such as the amount of parking for each unit, the stormwater drainage, as I spoke about earlier, pedestrian connections through to 104th to 103rd, the amount of traffic that will be generated, the design requirements, and then again, conformance with the PDP and the city's comp plan and codes. With that, we can go ahead and transition into the question and comment format. John, if you would go ahead and start reading off questions.
Yes, thank you, Jacob. The very first question is from Max Kirschbaum. It is, can you reevaluate the layout to accommodate a right-in, right-out access?
Sean, do you want to go ahead and respond to that? I'm going to assume Max means off of 104th Avenue.
And you're on mute, Sean.
Sorry about that. Yeah,
There you go.
so I was just thinking the same thing. Is it off 104th that he's speaking of? That's one of the requirements that we basically could not incorporate. The city didn't want any access to 104th. And I think there was several reasons. One being there was some of the winding subdivisions already access off 104th, and they would be too close to those. Right offhand, I can't remember some of the others, but we just weren't allowed to utilize any access for vehicles going up in.
Well, I think another one too, Sean, is with the water lines. They can't access the water line in Sheridan, or sorry, not Sheridan, in 104th. It's a large transmission main that the city did not want them to tap directly into. And so will be accessing the water line in 103rd, which when you have a water line, in this case, they have to create a looping water line system, which is what part of the private park is for. That allows for that looped water line system to be placed in the roadway instead of in like a private tract. And so that was part of the reason why it made a lot of sense to create the access off of 103rd.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. The next question is, will there be any elevation grading on the northern portion, the 104th side?
Elevation grading. So basically those lots along 104th, we're anticipating those houses to be walkouts. So the way that those lots will be graded will be obviously at the street level where they would enter the lot, and then at the back of the lot would be closer to the grade of 104th. There's approximately 9 to 10 feet of vertical difference between the front of the lot and the back of the lot. And that's where we'll have those walkouts homes. So to answer your question, I guess we'll be matching in with the existing grades along 104th. That one of the other things of reasons why we are doing that as well is we want people to be able to drive, east on 104th and really look over at the streetscape and just see it fluid, as though it's matches right in with the existing subdivisions on both the east and west side of us. So we'll be matching pretty much what they're doing on those windings subdivisions.
All right. Thank you, Sean. Next question from Tom Arenello, and I apologize if I've mispronounced that. Will all utilities be buried?
Yes. All utilities are underground, and like Jacob touched on a little bit there, the water will be brought in to the site from 103rd. It'll loop around our street and into the cul-de-sac, and then it'll loop back through the park. And then it'll also go out the same entrance to 103rd. That's required to loop that water line. The sewer will be basically gravity flowing the sewer from the lots near 103rd towards 104th, and then we'll connect, excuse me, we'll connect to the sewer main that's already existing out in 104th. And then the storm sewer, we won't have much other than some inlets right at the northwest street end of the site. And that storm sewer will also be buried in basically daylight into the detention pond. I think that's it.
Well, Sean, this is Chuck Haig again. Just wanted to chime in real quick. If he's referring to the overhead power and cable, that too will be underground. That is a requirement of new subdivisions to where you do need to go underground. So that will also occur.
Okay. Thank you. The next question is from Al Lindorfer. What is the maximum structural height for the home? I guess that means the highest point of the home.
Once again, Chuck Haig here. They will be, well, again, Jacob, you might be able to confirm this, but is it 35 feet is the max height you can go?
I believe that's what the ODP says right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, yeah, sorry for not remembering that, but yeah, so it'll be the max height that the city has set forth for all developments. Nothing outside the scope, the normal scope of height, so.
All right, thank you. Next question is from Tom Arenello. Will this be part of the Windings Homeowners Association?
No, we'll have our own homeowners association associated with this project.
All right, thank you. And Bill Nooning asks, what is the anticipated lot pricing range?
Yeah, it's hard to say at this point. As everybody knows, there's so much fluctuation in our market right now. It's very hard to say at this point. I'd say maybe around 300,000 at this point, but if costs keep continuing to rise, things could change, of course. So,
all right, thank you. Tom also asks, will this conform to the Windings covenants?
I don't, we're conforming to the new city standards. We won't be required to conform to any of the Windings existing covenants, but we really are trying to match what we're doing with the existing conditions around us. We don't want to create something that's, going to stand out like a sore thumb. And quite frankly, this will actually look much more appeasing than the 6 foot tall privacy fence along 103rd that, kind of makes it look like a fortress right now. So we are really going to try to make it just look as part of the neighborhood.
All right, thank you. And Bill Nooning asks, will there be fencing along the east and west sides?
Chuck, we haven't really discussed it as much. I believe so. I don't think we've designated exactly what kind of fencing we'll have there.
Yeah, it's true, Sean. Yeah, it's hard to, I mean, as it's submitted now, I believe we've mentioned what we're doing along 104th and 103rd. We have all the existing homes along the east property line that currently have fences. So that's something we have to be delved into with the homeowners, I imagine. The west side, with the slope and everything like that, I don't know. Again, we imagine there could be some fencing there. It will be allowed. It may not be part of our the development of the land. It may fall again on the homeowners themselves if they want to have privacy fencing in the rear of their homes.
All right, thank you. And Max Kirschbaum asks, does the trail connection to 104th have any sort of restricted access? And if so, why?
Well, as it stands right now, there is no restricted access. I think we kind of pushed for some restriction, as kind of more of a cautionary thing for people walking along 104th just couldn't enter the neighborhood. When we originally set up this access point, we had it more towards the east side of the site, closer to where the cul-de-sac is. And it was between two lots, and we realized we're creating kind of a hallway effect, if you will, something that you couldn't see around the corner sort of thing in it. It just didn't feel very good. So now we put it between lots 9 and the detention pond. And we feel like this is a much better area because we're not creating a corridor, if you will, that will be fenced on each side. One side will basically be open to the detention pond, and then the other would be fenced along the yard of that particular lot. But as it stands right now, we're not restricting it. No.
All right, thank you. Next question's from Bill Nooning. Stand by. Is the private park only for the use of the residents of this development? And will this subdivision have an HOA?
To answer the HOA quickly, that yes, it'll have its own HOA. And as far as the private park, no, I don't think it was necessarily intended to only be for the residents of this subdivision. Is that what you were thinking as well, Chuck?
Well, I mean, I believe it's labeled private park. It is a very small park anyway, but yeah, I don't know. I can't really speak to that. I know it's been submitted as a private park. I guess Jacob maybe could speak to what that means better than we can.
Sure. Yeah. So the city has a requirement that each residential development provide their own private park space. These are intended to be essentially kind of like a tot lot size park. So not in an effort to replace a city park where you may see large play fields or ball fields or a tennis court or such. It's generally meant more to be kind of in the tot lot category. So they are meeting that requirement for a private park. That being said, we've seen them treated differently across the city because they will be owned by the HOA. That HOA is required to get insurance and be liable for anything that happens on that property. We have seen several HOAs in the past that have signed their private parks as for use of their own residents. And not often, but we have seen a few of them fence off some of their amenities as well. So even though Chuck and Sean may not have an intention of that, 10, 15, 20 years down the road, they might choose not to have other people use their park.
All right, thanks. Next is a comment from Jill Lewis. Jill states that I am happy with the development itself. I like that it is only 18 new homes. The type of homes look very attractive. My concern is additional traffic noise on 103rd. We already have trouble with speeding on 103rd. Speeding cars make more noise than those going 25. I would like the developer to install 2 traffic calming devices on 103rd. Next is a question from Delbert Ragland. Will the subdivision be a part of the Windings Homeowners Association? I think we've already answered that. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes, we did. It's not going to be a part of that.
Okay. And from Bill Nooning, what will this do to the water pressure in the Windings?
Well, the preliminary, for one, we're adding, basically 18 services. We have one existing service that we're utilizing. So it's not like we're adding, a large amount or that'll be taking off of that water main. So we anticipate that, it won't change that pressure at all, in minute amounts.
Okay. Next question is from Delbert Ragland. Why is Jefferson County Schools listed as the schools?
I believe this, I'll have to double check that one. I'm not sure if, because we are in Adams County. So I'll have to double check. Do you know, Jacob?
No, I saw this question a few minutes ago and looked, and the PDP says Adams County. And I think this is Westminster Public Schools District. I'm not entirely sure. I just don't remember from the comment we got back from the school district. But I'll double check if we have that listed anywhere and correct it. But I'm not sure where that is.
Yeah, because I think it should be probably Adams County, don't you?
Yeah, it'd be one of the 2 Adams County school districts.
Right. Thanks.
All right. Thank you. And this is a good illustration of the stage we are at in the review process. We've only gone through one review cycle. We like to engage the neighborhood at an early stage. And so these documents will go through at least 1 or 2 more reviews, and a lot of these issues will be discovered and corrected and addressed through the process. So thank you. Delbert Ragland asks, will the park be a part of the initial development prior to lot sales?
I think that's one of the stipulations, is that all the design work as far as the streets and infrastructure and park has got to be built out, at least for a certain percentage of the homes. I think we discussed that a little bit, didn't we, Jacob?
Yeah, the city staff generally prefer to put a timeline or a condition for the development of common amenities on there. So I think that's something that we're actively working on, is what's that threshold for them. Obviously, we're sensitive to the concept that it takes money to build a private park, and if they haven't sold any homes, it's kind of expensive to build a park for no people. So.
All right, thank you. And Christopher Muniz asks, do you have an estimate for the duration of construction?
Time-wise,
Yes, I think from start to finish, I guess from breaking ground to final home being constructed.
I think I'll probably ask Chuck's input on this, but I'm thinking it's probably going to be at least a couple of years, right, Chuck?
Yeah, you'd have to imagine you have about a year's worth of site development, and then you'll have, let's say for a subdivision of this size, it could be 2 years would be good, up to 3 additional, or 2 to 3 additional beyond construction of the site. Just depends on our market. So our intent would be to sell them and have them built as soon as possible, of course. So.
All right, thank you. Al Lindorfer asks, do you know how the homes will set back and face on the lot? Specifically looking at lot 12 and lot 13, which is the northeast side of the parcel.
Yeah, so lot 12 will face, the front of the home will face, it might be allowed to be angled a little bit, but overall, it's lot 12 front door most likely would face to the south. Lot 13 would face to the west.
All right, thank you. Christopher asks also, where will the construction entrance into the development be located?
Normally we would have that at our entrance to the, that off 103rd there, where we can control any kind of construction vehicles going in and out of the site, and basically put down measures to where they won't bring, construction mud and different debris out with them in and out as they leave the site. So it'll be off 103rd for sure.
All right, next question is from Delbert Ragland. Who will be responsible for maintenance of the detention pond and pedestrian access?
So that will be a part of the homeowners association's responsibility.
All right. Crystal Carlo says, I have a number of questions and comments. Can someone unmute me? Crystal, yes, we can assist you there. Stand by in our
I'll unmute her, John.
Oh, okay. Jacob can do it.
Hi there. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Crystal.
Great. Thank you. So I have a number of concerns, having seen developments similar to this, especially with existing. I just wanted to kind of start off with the proposed drainage easement and drainage swale that runs along the south side to the west side up to the detention pond. From some of the responses and considering it's custom home building, I've seen problems occur when those builders submit projects and do their landscaping where drainage easements and swales that are supposed to be there to convey flows are not properly graded, don't have the proper capacity, and are sometimes just not installed. And so how is this proposed design and the easement, how is that going to be addressed so that isn't an issue, especially with custom home builders when you don't have a spec home where there's, coordinated grading efforts and overlap grading and whatnot, plot gradings that correspond with each other?
Yeah, that's a great question. Obviously our design hasn't gone to that level yet, but I could tell you the process when we get to the construction drawing level, we'll be creating some erosion and sediment control plans that will basically phase the project as it's being graded. to different levels. There's typically 3 different levels of erosion control: an initial site layout where they install a lot of the erosion control measures at the entrance, things of that nature. And then there's an intermediate phase where they do start installing the drainage swales that are going to be needed throughout the project to capture those flows before they can reach 104th. And they'll also do the grading for the detention pond. So they won't grade it to the final level, but they'll create a basin to trap those flows. And then through the progression of this erosion control phasing, we'll basically get to a final where they'll finalize those swales along 104th to capture the flows before they get, I believe, my initial grading, I was capturing those flows at the back of the lots before they ever reach anywhere close to the existing walk along 104th. And all of those will either be grass-lined swales, which will help with any sort of water quality as well as the direction of the flow. But we'll also put down things of the silt fences, which will help capture anything leaving the site. Straw wattles. We'll do whatever is necessary. So we do have a lot of grade on this site. So I mean, it's not like we're building something that's at the minimum of the standards as far as slope of grades. So we have a lot of grade, and 104th is fairly steep along that section. I believe it's running around 5%. So we're well within the standards. So we don't have to worry about tight construction. Did they get the slopes right? Because we'll have plenty of fall.
So thank you, Sean, for addressing, I think, kind of the erosion control or erosion and sediment control issues that are especially, problematic during construction and initial grading, and also until stabilization. But with regards to the actual cross section, I appreciate that you're talking about the longitudinal slope of the swale, being, more than adequate. That does bring up the question of what type of level. I've often seen in drainage reports for development where they are not evaluated for stability or the actual cross section for capacity and freeboard in the swales. And so even in something like, maintaining the bottom width, the depth with some being somewhat conservative to ensure that, you actually can convey those flows without it overtopping and spilling into the adjacent property and allow for construction error, basically, and settlement and disturbance and whatnot. What level are you going to be designing these swales in your drainage analysis to ensure that the contractors who are building it, whether it's a individual builder who's coming in and doing an individual lot versus your overlot grading is being implemented to the point where it's going to have no offsite impact?
Yeah, well, I think to make a long story short there, we'll be basically designing everything to the city standards. And I don't know if they require it, but I typically will size those swales within the drainage report and the final drainage report to make sure that the capacity is there and that we're actually building a swale section that is something other than just calling it a swale.
Yeah, because a lot of times I'll see like a half a foot or a 1 foot swale, which by the time you get landscaping in there, it's completely gone.
Yeah, and you know, based on, I know the swale that you're talking about along 104th.
It's not 104th. It's the one that's along 103rd that wraps around and goes north to south up to the detention.
Yeah. All of that will basically be probably oversized, if anything, and not a V swale. It'll be, you know, have a designated width to it. Again, I haven't sized those yet. I just did the preliminary grading, so I knew that, you know, okay, I'm going to have to capture these lots through a swale at the rear of these lots. That's basically, you know, all we've taken it up to this point.
Okay.
But normally in my drainage reports, I will size the swales according to how much developed flows will be entering them and also collecting in them as they go downhill.
What event do you size them for?
I believe the city is 5 and 100 year.
Okay, so you'll size them for the 100 year, so we don't have overtopping that goes into the residential neighborhoods and bigger events, basically.
Right, definitely.
So, Jacob, the question tied to this, does the city use the Mile High Flood District criteria manuals to help with the sizing of the swale? They have a lot of new swale design that they've added in the last 5 years. Is that something that you guys utilize to help with that sizing?
Yeah, they sure do.
Yeah, it is. We do require new developers to generally follow the Mile High Flood District standards. Part of that is to try to get maintenance eligibility on as many ponds as possible to assist with funding in the future. And then I'd also add, the city has actually recently expanded its stormwater team to include multiple field personnel, several inspectors. They will be dedicating an easement by plat to the city for both the detention pond and the swale. So the city will have access to that in the future to go and inspect it. We have recognized that it's a problem in older subdivisions throughout the city. So that's
to clarify, though, this is a private facility for development and private drainage swales, so those would not be maintenance eligible for Mile High Flood District, correct?
You can get maintenance eligibility if something happens to that private entity and they stop failing to maintain their infrastructure, or they begin failing to maintain their infrastructure. So you can get maintenance eligibility for private infrastructure.
For the pond, what's the outfall condition going to look like? Is that going to be tying into an existing storm sewer, or what's that condition?
It is. So we'll have an outlet structure designed, which will release the flows to an existing storm pipe in 104th.
Okay, and switching gears real quick, the axis that's proposed off of 103rd Avenue is shifted further to the east. That brings up some concerns related to some existing issues we have, as well as how that might actually pose a problem as well with regard to horizontal stopping sight distance and intersection sight distances. We currently have an issue at that radius on the horizontal alignment of 103rd Avenue to the east, southeast of the project. And so there's visibility issues coming around that corner. There's probably some speeding also associated with it, but the intersection as well as just around that curve with the existing fence line of the property that's directly to the southeast corner, there's already an issue in sight visibility in that area. with adding this access, I did some preliminary measurements, and it looks like that would only be compounded and added to, especially on the horizontal and intersection alignment for the proposed access point, as it is further to the east related to the horizontal site offset. Is that something you guys have looked at?
Well, I think, when we initially laid it out, we did it with the standards of the cities, with their site distances and site triangles in mind. So we currently follow, the city standards. I understand what you're talking about because it does lie just after the corner when you're traveling west on 103rd. But we do, we did lay it out per the city standard site distances.
So I appreciate that, but it still doesn't address the safety concern that I have. And I think a lot of our residents have with regards to what we've observed in this area. So in this case, I would say, while the city standards may be the minimum standard, I don't think that they are adequate at this location. And I would really like to see this further evaluated and potentially also evaluated at what the traveling speeds currently are, unless there's some speed mitigation in this area.
Crystal, I can pass that concern along to our transportation engineer to have him take another look at that. I'll make sure that he hears about that and see if we can follow back up with you on that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's definitely an issue that we've had, and I know a number of our residents have brought up, not necessarily articulating it the same way I have, but looking at it in that particular instance. It is an area directly to the east there where that, just with traveling cars, they kind of cut that center line, and you can't stop what people do. I mean, but take that away from it, and even people were driving where they are, we do have issues in that area. So, and the proposed access moving further to east seems to only compound that. Then other question on the trail, bocce ball play area. You said play area. How big is that play area? Is it going to be a play structure? Is there, what type of requirement? Because it's a pretty narrow strip, and the utility easement, I'm guessing that's for the water main you mentioned, and I'm assuming there's limitations on what structures are allowed over that.
Yes, that is correct, and it's got to be a hard, semi-hard surface over that easement. Just because we had to loop that water through there. The play area, I'll probably refer to Chuck a little bit on that as far as the size, but the bocce ball court we added. We just thought it would be kind of a neat feature, and it does fit in that area pretty well. But Chuck, did you?
No, I answer? Like some of these, some of our answers here, we haven't gotten to that point, being that this is kind of the first stage of submittal, but being it's a private park, just suited for, only 18 homes. It's not or 19 homes, forgive me. It's not a large park by any stretch. It's only 16,600, maybe 16,700 feet. So it's, it's going to be utilized more of a, kind of
a landscape track.
Yeah.
Yeah. It'll be beautiful. It'll have a bunch of trees, bunch of shrubs, flowers, things of that nature. So it's going to be more of a walking park. It does have the area for kids to run and play in, but it is overall, it's a very small park again.
Okay.
Yeah. It's geared just for, like I said initially, kind of just more of a neighborhood gathering park, little spot for kids to run and play with each other. Again, only built to handle 19 homes. So.
Yeah, and there'll be benches and stuff throughout it, lighting and things like that. It'll be a nice area. Really, too, you can't find any other areas in that winding subdivision that, offers even that. And I know
That's
that.
what we know. That's why we're interested.
Sure. And, so, I mean, even as small as it is, we're still above the city requirements for that area. We try to make it as large as possible to utilize it because we are putting that easement through it. And we know that, that has a lot of restrictions, as you know, in itself. So, we just try to get creative and make it as nice as possible.
So on the access easement that connects up to 104th, that is, I think, probably an emergency access easement as well for fire, or no? No, it's just the general pedestrian access easement.
It's just for the sewer, actually, for the sewer system, and then adjacent to it is the drainage.
Now?
It will have a sidewalk connection.
Okay. I guess something to mention and note that we're aware of here, some of the members here are aware of. There are some trees that are within and even at the property corners of the property that haven't been maintained over the years. And so just kind of a note, when you guys are doing the landscape plan on those, you'll notice those two trees, one at each end on the north side off of 104th, at each corner of the property. If those could go bye-bye, that would be excellent. They look pretty sad.
Yeah, I think, that's one requirement for this ODP process is a tree mitigation plan. And the city is really, detail oriented, if you will, with that plan and how we're, treating healthy trees versus, not so healthy ones, and how we have to replace the ones we will have to be taking out versus, but yeah, if they look that bad, I'm sure our landscape architect has probably marked them as unhealthy and to be removed. But I'll make a note. Yeah, I'll make a note and make sure that she knows about those.
What's your fence line? Oh, I'm sorry, I'm shifting already.
That's all right.
What's your fence line offset from the back of curb on 104th?
I think Chuck, we discussed doing the fence at the rear of the lots. So there is that easement back there that, so we're a little ways off. I don't know exactly. I don't have those numbers, but we're off of the.
It's more than 12 feet off the curb because they have a tree lawn, and then they also have a detached sidewalk.
Is it south of the tract D? Because it almost looks like those pillar posts are along that south track line.
Yeah, the fence will be on that south property line of that tract.
Are you guys going to be doing brick posts, or those brick kind of pillars on the fence?
The columns on the fence, yes. Every 50 feet, I think. So we've upped that spacing as well from the city requirements.
Okay. And are you doing that also along 103rd Avenue, or is it just along 104th?
No, both on 103rd as well. It'll look much nicer though on 103rd than what's currently there. For sure.
Yeah, it's this typical 4-inch slat dog ear on there that's like right behind the sidewalk. Are you guys going to set the fence back any further than where the existing fence line is there, or is it pretty much going to be back behind the back walk?
I think at this time we do have it at the back of the walk, mainly because of the drainage. I've got to get that drainage west to get in that swale.
Okay. Is there a possibility, I'm just going to throw this out there. Is there a possibility to consider, and I know it's not really working well with the topography, but lots 1 through 8, is there any possibility of maybe converting those to type A lots? I know that's kind of bucking the natural topography, but that would eliminate the need for the swale and the potential issues long term. My biggest concern in that swale is that long term we're going to have people come in and do landscaping in their backyards, and it's difficult. I mean, at least there's a drainage easement, but it's difficult to make sure that that's enforced and over the long term.
You know, it sounds like your experience in this profession is quite large, so you know that changing those from a walkout to an A lot or a B lot or anything other than a walkout lot is a lot. But really, the way the site grades, it's not like we had to hog out a lot of dirt in order to just start creating walkout lots on this site. I mean, those, if a walkout lot is ideal for any site, it's those lots along that line. And also, when I was grading it, anywhere where we would be close to having a difficulty getting back to grade before the property line, Chuck and I have already talked about creating barriers as far as any, some kind of landscape walls or something that will also help protect and contain any flows on our site. I mean, currently, there isn't much of anything that's directing those flows, albeit they're, going through grass and they're not well developed. But on a sizable event, I'm sure that water right now is going into those properties with no problem.
Yeah, I mean, the basin area is not substantial, but by the time you add roofs, patios, and whatnot, in a bigger event, those people in the existing Windings neighborhood could see impacts. Can I maybe offer another suggestion that I've seen work more effectively? That, defining the proposed swale in maybe a tract that is graded and defined in the overall development that is outside of the grading limits of the residential lots and landscaping of the residential lots. So it's maybe a natural grass swale that's maintained by the HOA, so that it's not something that the residents are messing with and kind of hidden behind fences.
I think that's a great suggestion. It is also a big ask. I think, we can make note of it. Maybe if Jacob wants to, make note of it for their review engineers. I understand where you're coming from, but I think if we do it right and we size, that swale accordingly, it's not like we're putting all the flows into that as well. And I do get it when you say that we're somewhat relying on the individual homeowners to maintain the integrity of those swales and
You're
not
hugely
alter them.
relying on the homeowners. Most of them
no, that's what I'm saying.
To recognize the importance of those.
And that's what I'm saying. I understand where you're coming from with that. But that's, an age-old problem, I guess, if you will. But
I've seen lawsuits, so it's obviously something that I, recognizing and making sure we're not having impacts to our existing properties, whether,
sure.
You guys try and plan for it,
Again, I would argue as well that it's not a substantial amount of flows that we're talking about either. In fact, a lot of them are going to be up on the very uphill end of the site. So, I mean, it won't be till halfway through that property line that we're really adding a whole lot of significant flows.
Sure.
And
I
we are.
certainly appreciate what you're saying. I've personally had to deal with residents and homeowners who just drainage from irrigation or roof drains, flooding and causing, wet drainage issues and swamps in their neighbors' backyards. So that's just an underlying concern that I've seen pretty prevalent with this kind of design.
Sure. I get it. Yeah.
So, all right. Well, I'll move on. I don't think I have anything else really of significance other than the things that I covered. So thank you so much
those are great.
Hearing me out. Appreciate it.
No, but appreciate your questions for sure.
And thank you, Crystal. I see you've entered some other questions. Did we cover those questions verbally for you? Or do we need to go through each one?
We went through all those.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I didn't want to overlook anything there.
Appreciate it.
Okay, so the next question is from Al Lindorfer. What is the plan for the 104th side in terms of fencing or any side sort of walls?
Yeah, I think we just talked about that and probably did after his question, but there's a drainage tract that goes along 104th before the property line, and we're anticipating on putting the fence line at the back of those lots that are along 104th Avenue.
All right, and this is a follow-up to that. How far in from 104th will the lots be and anticipated home locations?
I don't have an exact number on that.
I can maybe just speak to that a little bit. I mean, on average, the rear of the homes will be approximately 75 feet back. And the fence line, it jogs in from the existing homes on either side of this property, probably 12 to 15 feet to the south of where the existing fence line is.
All right, thank you. And Max Kirschbaum asks specifically for John and Jacob, can you give me the separate distance from Perry that an access point would have to meet? I think the Windings HOA will be concerned about traffic through the Windings.
I can have our transportation engineer look that up, and I'll get it provided to you.
Yeah, thanks, Max. We'll have to get Mr. Klein to follow up, but there are probably a few things he'll be following up on after this meeting. So we appreciate your patience. Next question is from Calvin Dotson. When does construction start and what will be the hours?
I don't think we're anywhere close to knowing that yet. We're at such a preliminary state.
Yeah, as far as the hours, maybe Jacob could get, I believe it's in the range of 7 or 8 to 5, maybe 4.
Yeah, I don't have the exact hours memorized, but it is generally business hours. I believe 7 a.m. is usually the start of construction.
And Calvin, just to give you an idea of the development review process or the entitlement process, including public hearings, the overall timeline generally ends up being anywhere from 6 to 9 months or maybe even 10 months from the start of this process to when the city council has its public hearing for approval. And then after that is when they get their engineering permits, grading permits, and then subsequently the building permits. So it is the applicant stated sometime earlier in the meeting, it would be about a year or so before they start actually constructing on the site from here. And Calvin also asks about what about dust, dirt control, and noise control?
So that again, I think I briefly touched on the erosion control plans and sediment control. That's all a part of that phasing of those plans, which is typically done during the construction document portion of the project. And we're just not there at this point, but we do have to account for all of that. In fact, you know, if we don't, I'm sure there'll be, you know, fines and stuff. So we take it very seriously, and we take a lot of responsibility in dressing the site accordingly to make sure that, you know, any dust and things of that nature is captured on site for the most part and won't directly affect, you know, the neighbors and the neighboring properties. Of course, it's impossible to catch 100% of it, but we'll definitely go above and beyond the city requirements for erosion and sediment control.
All right, thank you. And Delbert Ragland asks, would the lots be sold as a group to a developer if a developer made an offer?
Here you go, Chuck.
Yeah, certainly that's a possibility.
Okay.
Obviously, if that was the case, they'd still have all the requirements that are defined in the plat. They'd have to follow the same things we'd be following as far as home design, layout, everything. We'd get everything approved. They'd have to follow what is in the ODP.
All right,
Is there
thank
an
you. So next question comes from Bill Nooning. The ODP lists that pedestrian path is, quote, limited to residents only. Does that mean that it will be gated and accessible by the residents of this subdivision only?
No, it's not going to be gated. I talked about that earlier. Originally, we did have it as gated just for the simple reason, you know, we wanted to secure our site from just anybody walking through from 104th, but that was one of the city requirements, was to open that up and not have it be restricted, if you will, not necessarily gated, but restricted in any way.
Thank you. And Calvin Dotson would like to speak. Can we unmute Calvin?
I don't see that he has a microphone connected to his computer or to his device.
Okay. Is this one of those issues that we have with tablets and non-computer devices?
Yeah. Some tablets will not connect with a microphone to this software platform. So that might be the problem, Calvin. I'm sorry.
Calvin, if you are able to get your microphone working, just please type in the chat and let us know. Otherwise, I see you do have some questions down the list. I think you do, and we'll address those if you would rather just type them in. So the next one is from Daniel Hellman. Is there any chance that this plan will be scrapped in favor of a significantly different plan?
Not as far as I know. I think we have a pretty well thought out, you know, design. We haven't run into any major issues with the city that leads us to believe that what we've got laid out won't work.
Sean, I can add a little bit to that as well. We've actually had several other developers look at developing this as well, other home builders, and generally the designs are almost always the same. There's almost always a cul-de-sac. I think we had one that had a through street from 104th to 103rd. But all those other plans also had more homes in them too. So this is generally, I think, what you'll approximately see, just because the grade kind of requires it, and everybody is generally following the same standards. So they're kind of coming up with the same design idea. But if you have a separate design that you are interested in or to propose, you're welcome to email it to Sean or myself, and we'll definitely take a look at your idea.
For sure.
All right, the next question is from Delbert Ragland. Will the lots be overlot graded to define the drainage patterns?
Yes. Once they do the streets, we'll do an overlot grading on the lots. That way we can install the drainage swale along the west side of the property line and the swale at the back of the lots that are along 104th. Those will all need to be somewhat graded in early on to direct any flows while the lots are waiting to be sold and developed.
All right, thank you. Next question from Al Lindorfer. Will the existing power lines on the east side of the lot be buried?
So I know Chuck said that we are going to be burying those. And I think we're also going to look into the actual need for those, because all the power now, those power lines look like they strictly service the existing home. And so I'd imagine that we'll be putting in a new electric underground lines throughout the site. And so I'm not sure if we'll actually need those anymore, but if we do, they'll definitely be buried as a part of this project.
All right, thank you. Next is from Delbert Ragland. With the increased vehicle count, has the city entertained signalization of Perry and 104th?
So I could speak briefly about that. So this is not a sizable amount of vehicles that come down through the Windings subdivision. It amounts to 179 extra trips a day. Comparing that to the rest of the Winding subdivision with about 2,000 trips a day. It's approximately a 14% increase in total trips. So that hasn't reached the threshold to require increasing any of the intersections to signals. One thing the city is actively always doing is we are doing traffic counts along all of our arterials, and then also doing evaluations on the amount of time people have to sit at intersections to turn. And so periodically we'll go throughout the city and evaluate different intersections for that. And so that is an intersection the city has looked at. And I know our transportation engineer has looked at a lot of them throughout that section of the city and evaluated them. With this proposal, the city is not requesting or requiring the developer to do that. And the city has not identified that we would do that at this time.
All right, thank you. Next question is from James Howe. Your grading plan shows a considerable height increase on the northern lots. more than 5 feet of artificial height is added to lots 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. Of particular concern, the ground levels of lot 12 and 13 will be at the level of the top of the existing fences on the adjacent lot in the windings. The ground floors of the houses on lots 12 and 13 will be at or above the top of the existing fence tops, and the finished houses will tower over the 2 adjacent lots in the windings. Does the applicant have a response to that question?
Well, I think, again, those lots will be utilized more than likely as walkout lots. But I don't remember having a 5-foot fill in any one area. I'd have to double check that, but and to be honest, I haven't compared that finished floor elevation with maybe the top of that existing fence along that east property line. But we'll have full basements in these, and so I'm not really sure if you're worried about taking away some of the views from there. But we were just making it work with the existing grading there.
All right, thank you. Next question is from Bill Nooning. Will the HOA have the option to gate the subdivision in the future?
Chuck, I'll leave that one up to you.
Yeah, I can't speak to that. I don't believe so. I think based on public roads and how it's approved is kind of what stays in place. I think maybe Jacob could speak to that a little bit further, but I don't believe that would be an option.
Yeah, essentially in order for them to gate a subdivision and turn it into private means they have to adopt the maintenance responsibility of the roadway. I think throughout the city, we probably have maybe 2 or 3 actual gated communities of that type where the HOA maintains the road surface. And that's usually the thing that's the biggest attraction. So it's a smaller roadway, and there'll be 19 homeowners. So perhaps they could afford to do that. Kind of hard to say, but that's not their plan right now. So a future HOA would have to come in and request that.
All right, thank you. I do believe that's all of the questions. So if there's anyone in the audience that has any other questions, we'll give you a few more minutes to type them in. Here's another one from Al Lindorfer. When can we clarify the north side grading for lots 11, 12, and 13? We are the homeowners of the lot behind lot 12, and we're concerned with losing views.
I was just thinking about adding a little bit to my answer on that I'll make note of double checking that preliminary grading that I've created over there and look at that condition and see if I could minimize those elevations to try and cut down on some of that. I wasn't aware that if there is 5 foot of fill before the finished floor, so I'll double check those and just revisit that and make sure that if it's possible, I'll lower those as much as I can.
All right, thank you. And Crystal has a question.
We were also wondering when they could expect that. I guess to answer that real quick would be, after the next submittal for this ODP, I'll probably have a revised grading at that time, And if, you reach out and let us know, I can maybe send you a revised PDF plan of that grading.
All right, thank you. Crystal has another question. Who were these development notices sent out to? Not all the Winding residents got a letter.
Yeah, so we basically built a 500-foot radius around the project, and so all the residents within that 500-foot radius were sent a letter, and then also there were any of the subdivisions within that radius were also included, or subdivision, the homeowners associations were also included in that 500-foot radius.
All right. And I can add to the public notice is very important to our city council. And as a result, the city council has asked for an ordinance for their consideration that would increase the notice radius, among other things. And so on October 10th, the staff is presenting a new revised notification ordinance for the city council to consider and adopt. If the city council adopts this ordinance, it will increase that 500-foot notification radius to 1,000 feet. It would also require that all HOAs within that 1,000 feet be notified as well. But it does go a step further and requires that if that 1,000-foot radius intersects a separate subdivision or a filing of a subdivision, all residents or all property owners in that filing of that subdivision adjacent would be notified too. And if you're interested in that, that's going to be on the October 10th City Council agenda for consideration. So I think that's all the questions so far. We've got a little bit of time left, so we can give a little more time for anybody that has any last questions to ask. Okay, Crystal has a question. Are there any phases of this project that have additional public notice requirements? If so, can the neighborhood be included in future notices? Yes.
So I can answer that briefly. So the other notices that you'll likely see will be for the hearings for the Planning Commission and for the City Council meetings. I don't anticipate there will be more than just one for each of those. Likely everything should probably be handled there, and they likely probably won't be going back to a public hearing after they get their approval on these documents. So if City Council adopts that ordinance on the 10th, which we think is very likely, seeing as though they have kind of specifically asked for it, then that will trigger the requirement for the developer to do that notice. So, Crystal, I assume you're going to mean the Windings HOA contact. I will pull that.
Jacob, we lost your sound. Unless you're whispering.
And I lost my video.
Jacob, you're muted.
Seems like something happened to the connection.
Okay. Stand by. We'll try to get this corrected.
Hmm. Can you still hear me? It's Sean.
Sean, I can hear you. This is John. Can you hear me?
Yeah, but I no longer have a video feed, so I'm not
Okay.
sure something's happening with the connection. I think.
I'm trying to text Jacob
So am I,
presently to
John.
let him know
I'm trying.
he's very focused on what he's saying.
He is. He must not be able to hear us though.
I think not.
John, can you hear me? This is Jennifer.
I can hear
can.
you. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to try to chat into the box to Jacob here instead of cell phone. There, maybe
Oh.
now he's looking.
Oh, there you go.
Hello,
There you go.
Hey, you're back. So nothing you said for the last 3 minutes or so has been heard.
Okay. Oh, okay. All right. Sorry. I'll go
So
back.
start over.
I'm so sorry. I am so sorry. Okay. You guys can hear me now. All right.
Yes.
So I think where we had left off was with with who are the notices for the HOAs.
Yes.
So those are all typically with the management companies who have registered as the people who should get correspondence from the city. Usually most board presidents don't want to get correspondence, or at least that's what they have said in our city records. So for the Windings HOA, it has gone to Action Management LLC with Don Wilden, the community manager in Centennial, Colorado. For Highland Greens East, it's Vista Management Association in Westminster. For First Highland Greens Association, it's MSI in Westminster. For Vista Ridge HOA, it's Homeowners Concerns LLC in North Glen. And then for Watermark Sub Association and Legacy Ridge West, they're both MSI in Westminster. So one thing we've kind of noticed is not always do those HOA management companies give a timely notice out to residents that they did get a notice. Okay.
There's one more question.
Oh, the variances.
What known variances is the developer seeking at this point?
That was what I was going through, and I realized you guys couldn't hear me. Sean, do you want to answer it, or would you like me to answer it?
Sure, you can. I'm kind of having some problems as well with my computer.
Yeah, I've got it pulled up in front of me. So right now they're asking for 4 of them on their first draft of the ODP, and they will potentially be adding to it as we identify what are the things. So we don't, with PUD development, use the term variances. We call them exceptions to design standards, but they're very much the same, very similar in what they are. So the first one is that the design standards require 100-foot setback from arterial streets, so from 104th. They're asking for a 60-foot setback, which is very similar to what the Windings already has. Then there's also a requirement for a landscape area with a 6-foot high berm in it, in that 100-foot setback. So with the grade topography, a berm is not quite feasible. And then also for the need to direct some of the drainage, it's a little bit less feasible even still. So they're asking for alleviance for the berm requirement. Then another one is about for a small portion of the street, they want to go to a smaller street section with just parking on one side of the street. So it would be kind of a modified street section from the normal standard. That would be for a small portion of the development, not the whole street section. So that's another one they're asking for. And then the other one they've identified is there's a requirement that subdivisions have a landscape street median or an island at the entrance to the subdivision. Typically you would see this at the entrance from like an arterial or a collector street. Probably ones you can think of is the one that Highland Greens has at 101st and Sheridan. They have a median there. The main reason they can't achieve this is the duplicate water lines for the water main loop. Those two water lines, the city does not typically like to have water lines under landscaping or under any sort of structures or things that may be there. So the city is not in favor of them putting a landscape median on that entrance off of 103rd. So those are the four they've identified right now.
All right, thank you, Jacob. Any other questions from the audience? Okay, I think we should. Okay, Al Lindorfer, would you like to speak, or do you want to type your question in? Al would like to speak. Can we unmute him?
Yeah, I've just unmuted you, Al.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. This is for Sean. Our kind of concern is that we own that lot that we haven't developed on in the Windings, which is lot 12 of y'all's development. And if we could just get clarification, that grading, I know you are going to get that. We're just confused as to the gentleman had mentioned it being 8 feet where 9 to 10 feet of additional grading from 104th from the front to the back of the house. That's just a little confusing because when I look at it on the maps as being there, it seems like it doesn't make sense that the grading would be that high and there'd be additional. So we're just kind of concerned about that because obviously that adds an additional 8 to 10 feet on top of potentially another 35 feet. So I guess clarifying how that looks, I guess, would be great.
Sure. I guess I can maybe give you. Well, for one, I'll double check it because I can't imagine me grading that much fill, like I said. So I'll have to double check that and make sure the contours are showing correctly. And then maybe if you want to leave your contact information, I could kind of do a zoomed in area of that grading and break it down a little bit for you and just try and help clarify any of the confusion.
Yeah, this is Chuck Haig again. I wonder if some of the confusion is coming in from saying the 9 to 10 feet of fall, but there's already an existing amount of fall there of, I don't know, what is it from the south side, say lot 9 down to the street. It's already 6 or 8 feet. So we're only adding an additional few feet, I believe.
Right. We're not building up that finished floor to achieve that 9 feet of vertical difference to get walkouts. It's actually a natural drop between, the street and the street access to the lot to the back of the lot. I didn't have to, artificially build up those lots in order to achieve, any sort of walkout lot. So that's why I'm not positive where the confusion is, but I'll definitely take a look at it. And again, if I could send you any sort of detailed, of those contours, and we haven't detailed out the grading, if you will, but I have looked at it all as an overlot routine. And our intent definitely isn't to add 5 feet of dirt to achieve a finished floor. We don't need to. So.
Yeah, I assume not. Just wanted to clarify. I'll give my info to Jacob. I'll send him an email with it, and that'd be great.
Maybe I could send you a PDF or something. Are you able to see a PDF?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, I'll gladly do that to try and help. Mm-hmm.
I'll send Jacob my information to pass along if that's okay.
Yeah, you bet.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. Crystal has, looks like a couple suggestions for a non-landscape median on 103rd for traffic calming, like in North Park. And that way there's not the negative impact that comes with other speed reduction methods. And James Howe would like to speak.
James, I've unmuted you now.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
So what I did is in 2013, a LiDAR elevation model was flown for this area. And I took that topography at the elevation model, and I also digitized the contours for the grading plan. And then I calculated the difference computer-wise between the two. And it shows up to over 5 feet of material added to the south side of lot 12, and about the same amount to the north side of lot 13, and about 5 feet or so added to 11, 9, and 10. So that material is brought up to create a kind of a ridge for those northern lots. And that does raise the new grade level to about the top of the existing fence line there. So any house that's built on, say, lot 12 and lot 13 in particular will be, quite high relative to the adjacent lots in the windings.
All right, so it sounds like we've got some follow-up needed on this issue.
And Al Lindorfer, if you'd like to contact me, please do.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
All right, so that was the last question. I suggest that if anyone has any more questions, we'll give you just a couple of minutes, and then we'll have to start wrapping up the meeting with final comments.
John, I think I'll go ahead and just share our next slide so people do have our contact information.
Great.
This is Sean's contact information and my contact information. I assume you guys have already seen that on the notice for the meeting, but here it is again. If you need this, and also so you all are aware, we have recorded this meeting and we have live streamed it on YouTube. So this meeting will be available on the city's YouTube page. you will be able to find it. I think it'll probably be up tomorrow morning, so probably not later tonight. But you'll be able to go find it and reference again back to it. And then we'll also share it on our development status webpage. And the link for both of those are here. A little hard to grab them off of a meeting, but those are our links for both the YouTube videos and for our development status webpage, where we put up information about the development and also an extra place to provide notice of neighborhood meetings and public hearings. John, I don't see any extra questions. I think we can go ahead and wrap up the meeting then. Sean, anything else?
Yeah, no, I appreciate everybody's questions, and definitely look into, some of those and addressing, any outstanding questions with them.
Yeah, and I've got 2 follow-ups here as well to follow up on as well. So I'll try to do that tomorrow if possible, but it might be next week. So.
Great.
Okay. Well, with that, thank you all for joining us for the neighborhood meeting for Orchard Estates. Again, you'll get notices in the mail as well for the public hearings when those may come in the future. I would expect it to be several months before that would happen. In the meantime, we'll put several updates up on our development status webpage. And then all of these documents are available either by any of the development documents are available either by contacting me or by going onto the city's eTrack website and looking up the project numbers that are listed on the development status webpage. But with that, thank you all for joining us tonight and have a good evening.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.